Get your ghetto ass out of my seat before I call security to drag you back to where you belong." The words sliced through the first-class cabin of United Flight 487 like a poisoned blade. Every passenger within earshot froze. The woman who spoke them stood in the aisle like a conquering queen. Her perfectly manicured finger pointed down at the woman sitting calmly in Seat 2, a Victoria Blackwell, 29 years old, looked like she'd stepped off the cover of Vogue. Her platinum blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves over the shoulders of her crisp white Chanel power suit. Diamond earrings caught the cabin light, matching the tennis bracelet that probably cost more than most people's cars. She clutched an $80,000 orange Hermes Birkin bag like a weapon, her ice-blue eyes blazing with the kind of entitled fury that only comes from never hearing the word no. The target of her venom was Dr. Maya Williams, a 34-year-old black woman who looked like she'd been through hell. Maya sat perfectly still in her navy blue scrubs, her natural hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Exhaustion written in every line of her face. Her hand, steady enough to perform surgery on a beating heart, trembled slightly from 16 straight hours in the operating room. Before we dive into how this single moment of racist hatred destroyed a pharmaceutical empire in 90 minutes, I need to know something. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe that dignity isn't determined by your zip code or the color of your skin, smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. Because what happens next didn't just ground a plane, it grounded a dynasty. Let's rewind to understand how we got here. Dr. Maya Williams was chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. Just hours before boarding this flight, she'd performed emergency surgery on Senator Martinez's 18-year-old daughter, pulling her back from the brink of death when her heart stopped on the operating table. Maya's hands were insured for $5 million each by the hospital. She was flying home to Chicago for her mother's 60th birthday party, something she'd almost missed because of the surgery. Victoria Blackwell was the pampered heiress to Blackwell Pharmaceuticals, a $4 billion company that had made headlines 6 months earlier for raising insulin prices by 400% overnight. She was married to the company's 68-year-old CEO, Richard Blackwell, a man who'd made his fortune while diabetic patients rationed their medication and died. Victoria's $500 million inheritance depended on maintaining what the family called their pristine public image. In the cockpit, Captain Marcus Rodriguez was running through his pre-flight checklist. The 15-year veteran pilot was Mexican-American, the son of immigrants who'd worked their way up from nothing. Just last month, he'd buried his father, who died because he couldn't afford insulin after Blackwell Pharmaceuticals jacked up the price. Marcus had no idea that the woman who'd killed his father was sitting 30 feet away, about to destroy a black doctor's dignity for sport. But Maya Williams had no idea who Victoria was either. All she knew was that she'd paid $1,400 for Seat 2A. She was exhausted beyond description, and she just wanted to go home to her family. What happened next would change everything. 3 hours earlier, JFK International Airport buzzed with the controlled chaos of evening departures. Gate B12 hummed with the energy of business travelers rushing to make connections and families hauling oversized suitcases toward their adventures. Dr. Maya Williams moved through the terminal like a ghost. She'd been on her feet for 16 hours straight, leading a surgical team that pulled Senator Martinez's daughter back from the edge of death. The 18-year-old had crashed during what should have been routine cardiac surgery, and Maya had performed an experimental procedure that saved her life. The girl's parents were sobbing in the waiting room when Maya finally emerged, still in her blood-stained scrubs. "Doctor, how can we ever thank you, Senator?" Martinez had whispered, gripping Maya's hands. "Just love her," Maya had replied. "That's all the payment I need." now shuffling toward gate B12 in those same scrubs. Maya felt like she was moving underwater. She'd changed into fresh ones, but the weight of the surgery still clung to her. Her mother had been planning this party for months, and Maya had promised to be there. She rarely treated herself to first-class tickets, usually flying economy, and donating the difference to her scholarship fund for inner-city medical students. But tonight, she needed the space to decompress. At the gate, she approached the scanning station where Todd Mitchell, a young white gate agent with a perpetually bored expression, was checking passengers aboard. When Maya handed him her first-class boarding pass, Todd paused. He looked at her scrubs, looked at the ticket, then looked at her face like he was solving a puzzle. "ID, please," Todd said, his tone carrying just enough suspicion to sting. Maya had been through this dance 1,000 times. The soft interrogation, the barely concealed surprise that someone like her could afford to be somewhere like first class. She handed over her driver's license without comment. Todd scrutinized it, actually bending the plastic slightly as if testing whether it was fake. He held it up to the light, compared the photo to her face multiple times, then reluctantly handed it back. "Have a safe flight, Miss Williams," he muttered, already looking past her to the white businessman in line behind her. "Dr. Williams," Maya corrected softly, pocketing her ID. She didn't wait for an apology. She knew wouldn't come. Walking down the jet bridge, the noise of the terminal faded, replaced by the low mechanical hum of the Boeing 737 systems. Maya stepped aboard and turned left into the first-class cabin, a sanctuary of soft blue leather seats and warm ambient lighting. The cabin was mostly empty, save for a young Latina woman setting up her laptop in the front row, and an elderly white couple settling into their seats near the galley. Maya found seat 2A a window seat that promised the space and quiet she desperately needed. She stowed her beaten leather carry-on bag in the overhead bin. Inside that bag were surgical instruments, worth more than the Honda Civic she drove, but Maya had never cared about material displays of success. She collapsed into the seat, immediately buckling her seatbelt and pulling up the hood of her soft cotton jacket. Just sleep, she told herself. 2 hours to Chicago, then. Mom's party. Then maybe she could process what had happened in that operating room today. She closed her eyes, letting the gentle jazz music of the cabin wash over her. Her heart rate was finally slowing, her breathing deepening, when footsteps approached her row. "Excuse me," came a voice that could cut glass. "You're in my seat." Maya opened one eye. Standing in the aisle was a woman who looked like she'd walked out of a luxury magazine advertisement. Victoria Blackwell was stunning in the way that only unlimited money could achieve. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in perfect beachy waves. She wore oversized designer sunglasses despite being indoors, and her white Chanel trench coat looked like it had never encountered a wrinkle. In her manicured hands, she clutched a bright orange Hermes Birkin bag, worth more than most people's annual salaries. Behind Victoria stood a nervous-looking young man in an expensive suit, clearly her assistant struggling with 3 additional designer bags. "I think you might be mistaken," Maya said calmly, using the same measured tone she used when delivering complicated medical news to families. "I have seat 2A. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her boarding pass, holding it up. C2A. Victoria didn't even glance at the ticket. Instead, her ice-blue eyes performed a slow, deliberate scan of Maya's appearance. She looked at the scrubs. She looked at the worn sneakers. She looked at Maya's natural hair. She looked at her brown skin. And then her perfectly glossed lips curved into something ugly. "I don't care what that piece of paper says," Victoria scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "The computer system makes mistakes all the time. I always sit in 2A. Always. I am a Platinum Medallion member, and my husband owns Blackwell Pharmaceuticals. Do you know who that is?" Maya's blood chilled. Blackwell Pharmaceuticals. The company that had raised insulin prices by 400%, forcing diabetic patients to ration their medication. The company she'd been publicly criticizing in medical journals for putting profits over patients. The company responsible for countless preventable deaths. The irony was bitter enough to taste. "I don't care who your husband is," Maya replied, her voice gaining an edge. "I paid for the seat. I'm tired. Please find your assigned seat so we can take off." Victoria gasped theatrically, clutching her chest like Maya had physically struck her. She spun around to face the rest of the cabin, which was now filling with other passengers, her voice rising to ensure everyone could hear her performance. "Did you hear that?" Victoria shrieked, appealing to her audience. "She's being aggressive. I feel threatened." Near the front of the cabin, Elena Vasquez, a 26-year-old travel blogger from Miami, looked up from her laptop. She'd been recording content for her YouTube channel when the commotion started. Something in Victoria's tone made Elena's journalist instincts kick in. She quietly turned her camera toward the unfolding drama. Ashley Thompson, a 24-year-old flight attendant with a tight blonde ponytail and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, rushed over from the galley. Ashley had been working for United for 2 years, and she'd learned quickly which passengers deserved special treatment. She'd watched Victoria board, had seen the designer clothes and expensive bags, and had already mentally categorized her as VIP. "Miss Blackwell." Ashley gushed, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Welcome back. Is there a problem?" "Yes, there's a massive problem," Victoria snapped, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at Maya. "This person is in my seat and she's being incredibly hostile. I think she might be drunk." Maya's eyes widened in disbelief. "Drunk? I haven't had a drop of alcohol. I just finished a 16-hour surgery saving someone's life." "I don't care about your shift at McDonald's," Victoria interrupted with a cruel laugh. "Ashley, get her out of my seat. I have a very important meeting in Chicago. I need 2A. I need the space for my bags." Ashley turned to Maya, and suddenly the syrupy customer service voice was gone, replaced by cold authority. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your boarding pass." Maya handed over her boarding pass again, her patience beginning to fray at the edges. Ashley examined it with exaggerated care, then looked at her digital tablet, her fingers dancing across the screen. "Well," Ashley said, pursing her lips and glancing between the pass and Victoria. "It does say 2A, but—" She paused, clearly weighing her options. Ashley knew exactly who Victoria was. Blackwell Pharmaceuticals spent millions annually with United Airlines for corporate travel. The company had strict policies about keeping VIP passengers happy, and Victoria's husband was definitely VIP. "Ma'am," Ashley said to Maya, dropping her voice to a patronizing whisper. "Look, there must be some kind of computer glitch. Ms. Blackwell is a priority passenger. I'm going to have to ask you to move." "Move where?" Maya asked, incredulous. "The flight is full. We have a seat in economy plus row 15. It's really quite comfortable." "I paid $1,400 for this seat," Maya said firmly. "I'm not moving to the back of the plane." Elena Vasquez had heard enough. The travel blogger opened her TikTok app and hit the live button. Within seconds, viewers began joining her stream. "Hey everyone, Elena here," she whispered into her phone. "I'm on United Flight 487, and I'm watching something absolutely insane happen right now. A black woman doctor is being asked to give up her first-class seat to some entitled white woman, and it's getting ugly." The viewer count climbed rapidly: 500, 1,000, 2,500 people tuning in real time. Carlos Santos, a 32-year-old tech entrepreneur sitting across the aisle, had been trying to mind his own business. But when he heard Victoria's comments, he pulled out his phone and opened Instagram Live. As the founder of a social justice nonprofit, Carlos recognized racism when he saw it. "This is unreal," he narrated quietly to his phone. United Airlines flight attendant is asking a black doctor to give up her paid seat to some rich white woman having a tantrum. Rebecca Johnson, a 68-year-old retired teacher sitting with her husband 2 rows back, began recording discreetly on her phone. She'd seen enough discrimination in her 4 decades of teaching to know what she was witnessing. Victoria noticed the phones coming out, and her perfect composure cracked for just a moment. Then her eyes hardened, and she decided to double down. Ashley Victoria said loudly, ensuring her voice carried throughout the cabin. "Either you remove this person voluntarily, or I'm calling for air marshals. She's being threatening, and frankly, I don't feel safe." Maya remained seated, her hands folded calmly in her lap. "I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon," she said clearly. "I save lives for a living. I'm not threatening anyone." Elena spoke directly into her live stream. 15,000 people are watching this racism happen in real time, guys. This is United Flight 487 from JFK to Chicago. The flight attendant is named Ashley, and she's actively discriminating against this doctor. The hashtag Seat2Agate began trending as Elena's followers shared the stream across social media platforms. Ashley's face flushed red as she realized phones were recording her every word. "Everyone needs to put their phones away immediately," she snapped. "You're interfering with crew operations." "We're documenting discrimination," Carlos said firmly, not lowering his phone. "That's our right." Victoria sensed she was losing control of the narrative. "Time for the nuclear option." "Fine, Victoria," announced dramatically. "If you won't handle this, I'll call my husband. He'll have all of you fired." She pulled out her diamond-encrusted iPhone and began dialing. "Richard." "Yes, it's me. I'm being assaulted by some ghetto woman on your airline." Maya's calm finally cracked. "Excuse me. You heard me." Victoria snarled, her mask slipping completely. "Ghetto. Trash. You people always think you're entitled to things you can't afford. This is first class, not Section 8 housing." The cabin erupted. Rebecca Johnson gasped audibly. Carlos Santos shook his head in disgust. Elena's live stream exploded with outraged comments from her now 25,000 viewers. "Oh my God," Elena whispered to her phone. "She just used every racist dog whistle in the book. This is insane." An elderly white businessman 2 rows behind stood up. "Ma'am, that's completely inappropriate. The doctor has every right to her seat." Victoria whirled around. "Mind your own business. Unless you want to sit next to ghetto trash for 2 hours, you should support me." That's when Air Marshal Jake Peterson appeared at the front of the cabin. Jake was a 15-year veteran, a black man who'd joined the service after 9/11. He'd been monitoring the situation from the back of the plane, and Ashley's radio call had brought him forward. "What seems to be the problem here?" Jake asked calmly. Ashley immediately launched into her prepared narrative. "This passenger in 2A is refusing to follow crew instructions. She's being belligerent and won't move to her assigned seat." "That's not what happened," Maya said firmly. "I'm in my assigned seat." "She," Maya pointed to Victoria, "demanded I move so she could sit here instead." Jake looked at Maya's boarding pass, then at Victoria's. Victoria's pass clearly showed seat 4A, not 2A. "Ma'am," Jake said to Victoria, "your boarding pass shows 4A." Victoria's face twisted with rage. "I don't care what it shows. I always sit in 2A. My husband owns this airline's biggest pharmaceutical contract. You can't treat me like some common passenger." Jake's expression hardened. In 15 years of service, he'd developed a keen sense for when someone was about to cross a line they couldn't uncross. "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice and return to your assigned seat." "Are you kidding me?" Victoria shrieked. "You're taking her side. This is reverse racism. I want her arrested for assault." She touched my bag. Maya held up her hands, which had never left her lap. I haven't touched anything of yours. Carlos Santos spoke up from across the aisle. I've been recording this whole thing. She's lying. The doctor never touched her bag. Delete that video, Victoria screamed. I'll sue you. Elena's live stream had now reached 50,000 viewers. The comments were flowing so fast she could barely read them, but she caught enough to know this was going viral. Guys, the racist pharmaceutical heiress is now threatening to sue passengers for documenting her behavior, Elena narrated. This is absolutely unhinged. Rebecca Johnson, the retired teacher, stood up with her phone still recording. Young lady, she said to Victoria in the voice that had silenced rowdy teenagers for 4 decades. I've been teaching for 40 years, and you are the most entitled racist person I've ever encountered. That doctor has shown nothing but class, while you've shown nothing but your true character. Victoria's careful composure finally shattered completely. Her voice rose to a shriek that could be heard throughout the plane. I could have you all killed. Do you know who I am? I own people like you, ghetto. Trash like her disappears every day and no one cares. The cabin fell dead silent. Even Ashley's face went pale. Jake Peterson stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively toward his badge. In 15 years of law enforcement, he'd never heard such an open threat. That's when Captain Marcus Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom, cutting through the toxic atmosphere like a knife. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're currently experiencing a delay due to an operational issue. Please remain seated while we resolve the situation. In the cockpit, Marcus had been monitoring social media on his tablet during the pre-flight checklist. Elena's live stream had been shared to his Twitter feed by multiple followers. When he saw the hashtag Victoria Blackwell, trending alongside hashtag Seat2A-Gate, his blood ran cold. Victoria Blackwell, the woman whose husband had killed his father. Captain Marcus Rodriguez stared at his tablet screen in the cockpit, his hands trembling slightly as he read the live stream comments flooding in. 50,000 viewers had become 100,000 in a matter of minutes. The hashtags, hashtag Victoria Blackwell and hashtag Seat2A-Gate, were trending nationwide, and news outlets were already picking up the story. But it wasn't the viral nature of the incident that made Marcus's chest tighten with pain. It was the name. Victoria Blackwell. 6 weeks ago, Marcus had stood in a cemetery in East Los Angeles, watching his father's coffin being lowered into the ground. Eduardo Rodriguez had been diabetic for 20 years, managing his condition carefully with insulin that had cost $40 a month for most of his life. Then, Blackwell Pharmaceuticals had raised the price overnight to $400. Eduardo, a retired janitor living on Social Security, had started rationing his medication. I'll be fine, mijo, he'd told Marcus during their last phone call. I can make it last longer. I don't need as much. 3 days later, Eduardo Rodriguez was dead from diabetic ketoacidosis. Now the woman whose husband had killed his father was 30 feet away, screaming racist threats at a black doctor who'd just saved someone's life. Sarah Marcus said to his co-pilot Sarah Chen, a Latina woman in her early 30s who'd been flying with Marcus for 3 years, "Pull up the social media feeds. Flight 487 or 8. Sarah's eyes widened as she scrolled through the live streams. Captain, this is everywhere. CNN is already running the story. That woman just threatened to have passengers killed. Marcus unbuckled his harness and stood up. Take over the pre-flight. I'm going back there. Marcus, Sarah said carefully. Whatever you're thinking, remember you have 200 passengers on this plane. Don't let personal feelings. My personal feelings. Marcus turned to face her. Sarah, that woman's husband murdered my father. Not with a gun, with greed. And now she's terrorizing a doctor who saves lives. He paused at the cockpit door. Sometimes personal feelings are exactly what the situation requires. Marcus opened the cockpit door and stepped into the cabin. The first thing he heard was Victoria's voice still raised in venomous anger. "Don't care what your little phones are recording. My husband will destroy all of you. We own this airline. We own the government. People like her," she pointed at Maya with disgust, "need to remember their place." The cabin had become a powder keg. Elena's live stream was approaching 200,000 viewers. Carlos Santos was live on Instagram to his 30,000 followers. Rebecca Johnson was quietly recording everything for evidence. Other passengers had their phones out creating a digital documentary of discrimination in real time. Maya Williams sat calmly in seat 2. Her hands folded, her expression serene despite the chaos around her. She looked like the eye of a hurricane, perfectly still while everything collapsed around her. Marcus approached Air Marshal Jake Peterson, who was clearly struggling with how to handle a situation that had spiraled beyond normal protocol. Jake Marcus said quietly, "I need to speak with you privately." They stepped toward the galley where Ashley Thompson stood looking pale and uncertain. She'd realized her handling of the situation was being broadcast to hundreds of thousands of people, and her confident authority had evaporated. "Captain Jake said this situation is highly irregular. The passenger in 2A has done nothing wrong, but the passenger standing—" He gestured toward Victoria, who was now on her phone screaming at someone about lawsuits and firings. "Jake, I need you to listen carefully," Marcus said. "That woman is Victoria Blackwell. Her husband owns Blackwell Pharmaceuticals." Jake nodded. "I gathered that from her statements. 3 months ago, they raised insulin prices by 400%. My father couldn't afford his medication anymore. He rationed it and died." Marcus's voice was steady, but his eyes burned with grief and anger. "That woman's family fortune is built on the corpses of diabetics." Before Jake could respond, Sarah Chen's voice crackled through Marcus's radio. "Captain, you need to get back here. We just received an emergency medical call from Denver General Hospital. They have a cardiac patient in critical condition, and they're specifically requesting Dr. Maya Williams. Apparently she's the only surgeon who's successfully performed some experimental heart procedure." Marcus looked through the galley entrance at Maya, still sitting calmly despite Victoria's continued tirade. Then he looked at Victoria, whose face was flushed red with rage as she screamed into her phone. A terrible suspicion began forming in Marcus's mind. Sarah Marcus said into his radio, "What's the name of the patient in Denver?" Richard Blackwell came the reply. 68-year-old male, massive myocardial infarction. They say it came out of nowhere during a board meeting. Family is requesting immediate transport to—" Marcus didn't hear the rest. Richard Blackwell, Victoria's husband. The man who'd killed his father was dying in Denver, and the only person who could save him was the Black Doctor. Victoria was currently trying to destroy, but something about the timing felt wrong. Marcus looked at Victoria again, noticed how she kept checking her phone, how her anger seemed performative rather than genuine. 20 years of flying had taught him to read people, to spot the subtle signs when someone was hiding something. Marcus walked back toward the confrontation. Victoria was still on her phone, her voice carrying throughout the cabin. "Told you the board meeting was today? Why are you calling me about—" She stopped mid-sentence, her face draining of color. "What? When? How is that possible?" Maya looked up at the sudden change in Victoria's tone. As a surgeon, she'd heard that voice countless times the moment when someone received devastating news. "Ma'am," Marcus said, approaching Victoria. "I need to speak with you privately." Victoria spun around, her phone still pressed to her ear. "Who are you?" "I'm on an important call. I'm Captain Rodriguez. I need to inform you that we've received an emergency medical request from Denver General Hospital. Your husband has suffered a massive heart attack." The phone slipped from Victoria's hand, clattering to the cabin floor. For a moment, her perfect mask cracked, revealing something that looked almost like panic. "That's..." "That's impossible," she whispered. "He was fine this morning. I just talked to him before the board meeting." Marcus bent down and picked up Victoria's phone. The screen was still lit, showing her recent text messages. What he saw made his blood freeze. The most recent message thread was with someone labeled Dr. K. Victoria. Added the extra pills to his morning coffee, as discussed. Dr. K. Perfect timing with the board meeting. Make sure you're in Chicago when it happens. Victoria. How long until symptoms show? Dr. K. 2 to 3 hours maximum. Will look like natural cardiac event, Victoria. And the inheritance, Dr. K. As long as the morality clause isn't triggered, you inherit everything. Carlos Santos, who was standing close enough to see the phone screen, gasped audibly. His Instagram live stream was still running, and he quickly repositioned his phone to capture the text messages. "Holy shit," Carlos whispered, then louder. "She poisoned him. She poisoned her own husband." The cabin erupted in shocked gasps. Elena's TikTok live stream exploded with comments as viewers realized they were witnessing not just racism, but attempted murder in real time. Maya Williams, who had remained silent through the entire confrontation, finally stood up. Her medical training had kicked in, and she could see Victoria's guilty panic written across her face. "Ma'am," Maya said calmly, "if your husband is having a heart attack and you have information about what might have caused it, you need to tell me now. I'm the doctor they're requesting, and every second counts." Victoria's eyes darted between Maya, the phone in Marcus's hand, and the dozens of other phones recording her every reaction. "I don't know what you're talking about," Victoria said, but her voice was shaking now. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years in command. "Ma'am, I'm reading text messages on your phone that suggest you deliberately poisoned your husband's coffee this morning. Dr. Williams is the only person who can save his life, and we need to get to Denver immediately. Jake Peterson." The air marshal stepped behind Victoria. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under federal custody on suspicion of attempted murder." "You can't." Victoria screamed, her composure completely shattered. "I haven't done anything. This is all her fault." She pointed at Maya. "If this ghetto bitch had just moved to economy like she was supposed to, none of this would have happened." Maya looked directly into Victoria's eyes, her voice calm and steady despite the chaos. "Ma'am, whether you tried to kill your husband or not, whether you hate me or not, I took an oath to do no harm. If he needs surgery, I'm going to save his life. That's what doctors do." The cabin fell silent, except for the quiet sobbing of passengers who were witnessing something unprecedented. Elena's live stream had reached 500,000 viewers. News outlets across the country were breaking into regular programming to cover the story. Marcus made his decision. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a medical emergency, we are diverting to Denver International Airport. Please prepare for immediate departure." As the plane began to taxi toward the runway, Victoria Blackwell sat in federal custody, her perfect life crumbling around her. Maya Williams returned to her seat mentally preparing to save the life of a man whose wife had just tried to kill him. And Captain Marcus Rodriguez gripped the controls knowing that in less than 2 hours he would deliver the woman who'd killed his father to face justice while ensuring that a black doctor could save the life of the man who'd made that murder possible. Sometimes justice comes in the most unexpected forms. Denver General Hospital's emergency department had seen its share of high-profile cases, but nothing quite like this. When United Flight 487 touched down at Denver International Airport 45 minutes ahead of schedule, it was met by a convoy of FBI vehicles, 3 ambulances, and more news vans than anyone could count. Dr. Maya Williams was the first person off the plane, escorted by 2 federal agents who'd boarded during the emergency stop. She'd spent the flight reviewing Richard Blackwell's medical files on her tablet, preparing for surgery that would either save the life of a man whose company had killed thousands, or fail spectacularly in front of half the world. Victoria Blackwell was led off in handcuffs, her white Chanel suit wrinkled and stained with tears. The woman who'd walked onto the plane like a conquering queen now looked like what she was, a suspect in an attempted murder that was being live-streamed to millions of viewers worldwide. Elena Vasquez had kept her TikTok live stream running throughout the flight, providing play-by-play commentary to an audience that had grown to over 1 million viewers. Hashtag Victoria Blackwell was trending #1 worldwide, alongside hashtag Dr. Maya Williams and hashtag Poison Heiress. The story had transcended social media, with news outlets in 12 countries providing coverage. "This is absolutely unprecedented," Elena whispered into her phone as the plane emptied. "I've been documenting travel for 5 years, and I've never seen anything like this. A racist pharmaceutical heiress trying to murder her husband, exposed by the black doctor she tried to humiliate. You can't write this stuff." At Denver General Doctor Sarah Mitchell. The chief of emergency medicine was waiting in the trauma bay when Maya arrived. Sarah had followed Maya's work for years, particularly her innovative techniques in cardiac surgery. "Dr. Williams," Sarah said, shaking Maya's hand. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Richard Blackwell is stable for now, but his condition is deteriorating rapidly. We've never seen toxicology results quite like this." Maya pulled on her surgical scrubs, her exhaustion forgotten in the face of a medical challenge. "What are we looking at? Digitalis poisoning, but in doses we've never encountered. Someone gave him enough foxglove extract to kill a horse, but spread out over several hours to make it look like a heart attack. It's diabolical." In the waiting room, FBI agent Jennifer Martinez was interviewing Victoria Blackwell while her high-profile attorney Robert Kane sat beside her, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Kane was a federal criminal defense specialist who charged $5,000 an hour, but he'd never handled a case quite this public. "My client has nothing to say," Kane interjected every time Agent Martinez asked a question. But Victoria couldn't help herself. The woman who'd spent her life getting her way through tantrums and threats was watching her carefully constructed world crumble in real time. "This is insane," Victoria said, ignoring her lawyer's warnings. "You people are treating me like a common criminal. I'm Victoria Blackwell. My husband owns half of this state's medical infrastructure. You can't just—" "Ma'am," Agent Martinez interrupted. "Your husband is currently dying from digitalis poisoning. We have text messages on your phone discussing the timing of his cardiac event. We have witness testimony from an entire airplane full of passengers. What exactly is insane about treating you like a suspect?" Victoria's face flushed red. "Those text messages are fake. That ghetto doctor probably planted them somehow. She's been jealous of my success from the moment she saw me." Kane winced at his client's words. Every statement Victoria made was being recorded, and every racist comment would be used against her in court. Meanwhile, in the surgical suite, Maya Williams was performing the most complicated procedure of her career, while knowing that millions of people were following every update on social media. Richard Blackwell's heart had been damaged not just by the poison, but by months of stress from running a pharmaceutical company that had made him one of the most hated men in America. Dr. Sarah Mitchell assisted while providing updates to the media waiting outside. Dr. Williams is performing an experimental cardiac repair procedure that she developed at Mount Sinai. She's essentially rebuilding portions of Mr. Blackwell's heart muscle while neutralizing the digitalis poison. 3 hours into the surgery, Maya made a discovery that changed everything. Richard Blackwell's medical records showed a pattern of digitalis in his system dating back 6 months. Not enough to kill him, but enough to gradually weaken his heart and make him dependent on his young wife for daily care. Dr. Mitchell Maya said, without looking up from her work, "We need to contact the FBI immediately. This wasn't attempted murder. This was slow-motion assassination. She's been poisoning him for months." Outside the surgical suite, news of Maya's discovery spread like wildfire. Elena Vasquez was still live streaming from the hospital waiting room, providing updates to her audience of nearly 2 million viewers. According to sources inside the surgery, Elena reported Dr. Williams has discovered evidence that Victoria Blackwell has been slowly poisoning her husband for months, gradually weakening his heart while positioning herself to inherit his fortune. The revelation sent shockwaves through the pharmaceutical industry. Blackwell Pharmaceutical's stock price had already crashed 60% during the flight, but news of the long-term poisoning plot sent it into freefall. Agent Martinez confronted Victoria with the new evidence, while Robert Kane looked like he wanted to disappear. "Mrs. Blackwell, we now have medical evidence that you've been poisoning your husband for 6 months. This isn't just attempted murder. This is a calculated assassination plot." Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. The entitled heiress who'd terrorized a black doctor for sport revealed the monster underneath. "You don't understand," Victoria snarled. "That old man was going to leave everything to charity. 68 years old, and he suddenly develops a conscience about insulin prices. I wasn't going to let some diabetes foundation steal my inheritance." Kane dropped his head into his hands. His client had just confessed to attempted murder on camera. "He deserved it," Victoria continued, her voice rising. "All those people whining about insulin prices, they should have worked harder, made more money. It's not my fault they're poor." Agent Martinez turned off her recorder. She'd heard enough. At that moment, Maya Williams emerged from surgery still in her blood-stained scrubs. She found Agent Martinez in the hallway and delivered the news that would dominate headlines for weeks. "Agent Martinez, Richard Blackwell is stable. He'll make a full recovery." Maya paused, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "But I need you to know something." The damage to his heart was extensive. Without surgery, he would have died within hours. If that plane hadn't been diverted, if I hadn't been there. "You saved his life," Agent Martinez said. Maya nodded slowly. "I saved the life of a man whose wife tried to kill him, whose company has killed thousands of diabetics, including Captain Rodriguez's father. I saved him because that's what doctors do. We don't get to choose who deserves to live." Down the hallway, Victoria Blackwell was led away in handcuffs, her racist rants echoing through the hospital corridors. Her $500 million inheritance was gone, her freedom was forfeit, and her name would forever be associated with greed, racism, and attempted murder. But Maya Williams stood quietly in that hospital hallway, having upheld her oath to do no harm even when faced with pure evil. And in Surgical Suite 3, Richard Blackwell slowly opened his eyes alive because of the skill and grace of the woman his wife had tried to destroy. The media explosion that followed Victoria Blackwell's arrest was unlike anything the pharmaceutical industry had ever witnessed. Within hours of Maya Williams saving Richard Blackwell's life, the story had become international news. Victoria's racist tirade, combined with her confession to slowly poisoning her husband, created a perfect storm of public outrage that corporate America couldn't ignore. Richard Blackwell awoke in his hospital bed to find FBI agent Jennifer Martinez and his longtime attorney, Arthur Hayes, waiting beside Maya Williams. Arthur had been Richard's legal counsel for 20 years, but he'd never had to deliver news quite like this. "Mr. Blackwell," Arthur said gently, "I need to inform you that your wife has been arrested for attempted murder. The evidence suggests she's been poisoning you for months." Richard stared at the ceiling for a long moment, then turned to look at Maya. "You're the doctor from the plane." "The woman, Victoria." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Yes," Maya said simply. "I'm Dr. Maya Williams. She called you terrible things. Said horrible racist." Richard's voice cracked. "And you saved my life anyway." Maya nodded. "That's what doctors do." Richard closed his eyes, and when he opened them, something fundamental had changed. "Arthur, I want you to call an emergency board meeting. I'm announcing my retirement from Blackwell Pharmaceuticals effective immediately. and I want insulin prices rolled back to where they were 5 years ago." Sir Arthur said carefully, "That's a billion-dollar decision. Perhaps you should wait until—" "How many people died because of our greed?" Richard interrupted, looking directly at Maya. "How many Captain Rodriguez's fathers died because I wanted to maximize profits?" Maya remained silent. This wasn't her conversation to have. 1,000, Richard continued. 5,000. How many diabetics rationed their medication and died because I decided insulin was a luxury item instead of a life-saving necessity? Arthur pulled out his tablet. "Sir, if you're serious about this, we need to move quickly. The board is already discussing replacing you as CEO, given the circumstances." "Then let them try," Richard said, his voice gaining strength. "Dr. Williams, would you be willing to stay in Denver for a few days? I'd like you to attend the emergency board meeting as a medical consultant." Maya looked at Agent Martinez, who nodded. "Mr. Blackwell, I have to ask, are you making these decisions under duress? Your wife did just try to kill you." Richard laughed bitterly. "Agent Martinez, my wife has been slowly murdering me for months while I murdered diabetics with pricing schemes. I think I'm seeing clearly for the first time in years." 3 days later, the Blackwell Pharmaceutical's emergency board meeting was held in the company's Denver corporate office. The boardroom was packed with executives, lawyers, journalists, and medical experts. Maya Williams sat at the table as the medical consultant, her presence a constant reminder of how the crisis had unfolded. Richard Blackwell, pale but determined, addressed his board of directors for the last time as CEO. "Ladies and gentlemen, Blackwell Pharmaceuticals has built a fortune on the desperation of diabetic patients. We've raised insulin prices by 400%, while our production costs remained essentially unchanged. We've justified this as market-based pricing. But let's be honest, we've been holding people's lives for ransom." Board member Patricia Morrison, a 60-year-old pharmaceutical veteran, shifted uncomfortably. "Richard, I understand you've been through a traumatic experience, but we have fiduciary responsibilities to our shareholders. Our fiduciary responsibility is to save lives, not maximize stock prices," Richard interrupted. "Dr. Williams, would you mind sharing your perspective on insulin access?" Maya stood slowly. She'd prepared for this moment, knowing that her words would be quoted in medical journals and policy debates for years to come. "Board members, I've treated hundreds of diabetic patients in my career. I've seen teenagers ration insulin and go into ketoacidosis because they couldn't afford their medication. I've seen elderly patients choose between insulin and rent. I've seen Captain Rodriguez bury his father because a company decided that profit margins were more important than human life." The room was dead silent. "Your insulin price increases have killed more Americans than some wars," Maya continued. "The difference is that wars end. Your pricing scheme was designed to continue indefinitely extracting maximum revenue from captive customers who would literally die without your product." Patricia Morrison tried to interrupt, but Maya held up her hand. "I'm not finished. You want to talk about fiduciary responsibility. Your company has created a public relations nightmare that will take decades to repair. Your stock price has collapsed. Your CEO's wife just confessed to attempted murder on international television. Your brand is now synonymous with corporate greed and racism. From a purely business perspective, immediate price reductions aren't just morally necessary, they're economically essential for corporate survival." The boardroom erupted in discussions as executives realized that Maya was right. Blackwell Pharmaceutical's stock had lost 70% of its value in 3 days. Congress was already scheduling hearings on pharmaceutical pricing. International governments were discussing generic insulin manufacturing to bypass American pharmaceutical companies entirely. Richard Blackwell called for order. "The motion on the table is simple. roll back insulin prices to 2018 levels, immediately establish a patient assistance program for low-income diabetics, and create a foundation to provide free insulin to patients who cannot afford it. All in favor. The vote was unanimous. Even Patricia Morrison raised her hand, recognizing that the company's survival depended on dramatic action. Maya Williams watched as the board approved changes that would save thousands of lives and billions of dollars for diabetic patients across America. She thought about Captain Rodriguez's father, about all the patients she'd treated who'd rationed medication, about the power of one moment of moral courage to create widespread change. As news of the insulin price rollback spread, other pharmaceutical companies began announcing their own price reductions. Congress fast-tracked legislation creating federal oversight of essential medication pricing. Medical schools began incorporating pharmaceutical ethics into their core curricula. Elena Vasquez, who had documented the entire crisis from her airplane seat, was offered a position as a correspondent with CNN. Her TikTok documentation of Victoria Blackwell's racist meltdown became a case study in how social media could expose injustice in real time. Captain Marcus Rodriguez was promoted to Director of Diversity and Inclusion for United Airlines, leading company-wide training on recognizing and responding to discrimination. The airline established the Rodriguez Fund, providing free flights for medical professionals traveling to treat underserved communities. Ashley Thompson, the flight attendant who had enabled Victoria's racist demands, was terminated, and her discriminatory actions became a training example for flight crews nationwide. But perhaps the most significant change was personal rather than corporate. Richard Blackwell established the Maya Williams Foundation for Medical Equity, donating $50 million to provide scholarships for underrepresented students in medical school. During the foundation's inaugural ceremony, Richard approached Maya privately. "Dr. Williams, I know I can never undo the harm my company has caused. Captain Rodriguez will never get his father back. Thousands of diabetics have died because of my greed. But I want you to know that saving my life didn't just keep me alive, it made me want to be worth saving." Maya smiled, the first genuine smile she'd shown since the crisis began. Mr. Blackwell, redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing differently going forward. You've made that choice. As the foundation ceremony concluded, Maya reflected on how a single moment of refusing to accept discrimination had created ripple effects throughout American healthcare. Sometimes justice comes not from punishment, but from transformation. And sometimes the most powerful response to hatred is simply refusing to let it change who you are. 6 months after United Flight 487 made its emergency landing in Denver, Maya Williams walked through the jetway at O'Hare International Airport, preparing to board another United flight. This time she wasn't exhausted from surgery or heading home to her mother's birthday party. She was traveling to Geneva to present her cardiac repair technique at the International Medical Conference, where her work saving Richard Blackwell's life had revolutionized emergency cardiac care. The difference was striking. Airport employees recognized her now, greeting her with genuine warmth and respect. Gate agent Todd Mitchell, the man who had scrutinized her boarding pass 6 months earlier, was working the Geneva flight. When he saw Maya approaching, his face flushed with embarrassment. Dr. Williams Todd said quietly, "I owe you an apology. The way I treated you that day was inexcusable. I've been through sensitivity training because of what happened, and I wanted you to know that I'm genuinely sorry." Maya paused, studying his face. She could see that his remorse was genuine, that he'd spent months reflecting on his behavior. "Todd," Maya said gently, "apology accepted. We all have the opportunity to choose differently going forward." As Maya boarded the plane, she was greeted by a familiar voice over the intercom. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. My name is Marcus Rodriguez, and I'd like to welcome you aboard United Flight 847 to Geneva." Maya smiled as she settled into Seat 2A, the same seat number that had started this entire journey. The cabin was quieter than that chaotic evening 6 months ago, filled with business travelers and medical professionals heading to the conference. "We have a very special passenger with us today." Marcus continued, his voice warm with genuine affection. "Dr. Maya Williams, who many of you may know from the news, is traveling with us to Geneva to present groundbreaking research that has already saved hundreds of lives around the world. Dr. Williams has taught all of us that dignity isn't about where you sit, but how you stand your ground when faced with injustice." The entire cabin erupted in applause. Passengers turned in their seats to smile at Maya, and several raised their phones to record the moment. But this time, the cameras weren't documenting discrimination, they were celebrating courage. Maya raised her water glass toward the cockpit in a quiet salute to Marcus, then settled back to review her presentation notes for Geneva. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away in a minimum security federal facility in Colorado, Victoria Blackwell was beginning her 15th year of her sentence. Federal prosecutors had successfully convicted her on charges of attempted murder conspiracy and hate crime enhancements. Her 15-year sentence reflected the premeditated nature of her crime and the racist motivation behind her actions. Inmate number 47,291 was assigned to the prison medical library, a placement that corrections officials considered ironically appropriate. Victoria spent her days cataloging medical journals and research papers surrounded by the kind of life-saving information she'd once tried to prevent people from accessing. Her orange jumpsuit was a far cry from the white Chanel suit she'd worn that day on the plane. Her manicured nails were broken and unpolished. Her platinum blonde hair had grown out, revealing brown roots that she could no longer afford to maintain. The woman who'd once clutched an $80,000 handbag now carried her belongings in a standard prison-issue cloth bag. Blackwell, a corrections officer, called out, "You have a visitor." Victoria looked up from the medical journals she was shelving, surprised. She'd had no visitors in months. Her wealthy friends had abandoned her, her family had disowned her, and her expensive lawyers had moved on to paying clients. In the visitor's room, she found Elena Vasquez waiting for her. Elena had become a successful investigative journalist, and she was working on a documentary about the long-term impacts of social media in exposing injustice. Mrs. Blackwell Elena said, setting up her camera, "I wanted to ask you about your experience and whether you've gained any perspective on what happened." Victoria stared at Elena for a long moment. The young Latina woman who documented her meltdown had gone on to become a respected journalist while Victoria had lost everything. "Perspective," Victoria said bitterly. "You want to know my perspective? I lost everything because some uppity doctor couldn't just move to economy class like she was supposed to." Elena's heart sank. After 15 months in prison, Victoria Blackwell had learned nothing. She was still blaming Maya Williams for her own racist actions and criminal behavior. Mrs. Blackwell Elena said gently, "Dr. Williams saved your husband's life after you tried to kill him. She showed grace and professionalism while you called her racist slurs and threatened to have passengers murdered. Don't you see that your actions were wrong?" Victoria's face hardened. "That woman ruined my life. If she'd just known her place, none of this would have happened." Elena turned off her camera and stood to leave. Some people, she realized, were incapable of growth or redemption. Victoria Blackwell would spend the next decade in prison, still convinced that her victims were somehow responsible for her choices. Back in Geneva, Maya Williams was receiving a standing ovation from 2,000 of the world's leading medical professionals. Her presentation on emergency cardiac repair had been flawless, and her technique was already being implemented in hospitals across 6 continents. As she left the stage, Maya was approached by Dr. Jean-Claude Moreau, the director of the World Health Organization's Cardiac Health Initiative. "Dr. Williams." Dr. Moreau said we'd like to invite you to lead our new global cardiac equity program. Your work has shown us that medical innovation must be coupled with social justice to truly serve humanity. Maya considered the offer. Leading a global program would mean traveling extensively, working with underserved populations worldwide, and continuing the fight for medical equity on an international scale. Dr. Moreau. Maya said, "I accept on one condition. The program must include specific initiatives to provide cardiac care in communities that pharmaceutical companies have historically exploited. We save everyone regardless of their ability to pay." "Of course," Dr. Moreau smiled. "That's exactly why we want you to lead it." That evening, Maya video called her mother from her Geneva hotel room. The woman who'd raised her daughter to believe in dignity and service was now watching that daughter change the world. "Mama," Maya said, "I keep thinking about that day on the plane. If I had just moved to economy class like Victoria demanded, if I hadn't stood my ground." "Baby," her mother interrupted, "you didn't stand your ground for yourself. You stood your ground for every black person who's ever been told they don't belong somewhere they have every right to be. You stood your ground for Captain Rodriguez's father and every diabetic who's rationed insulin. You stood your ground for everyone who's ever been made to feel small by someone with money and privilege." Maya smiled through tears. "Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing saving Richard Blackwell's life after everything his company had done." "Maya," her mother said firmly, "you did what doctors do. You saved a life. The fact that you saved someone who'd caused so much harm just proves that you're better than the people who tried to break you down. That's not a weakness, baby. That's your superpower." As Maya ended the call, she looked out her hotel window at the lights of Geneva. Somewhere in Colorado, Victoria Blackwell was sleeping in a prison cell, still convinced that she was the victim. Somewhere in Chicago, Captain Marcus Rodriguez was home with his family, finally able to afford his diabetes medication, thanks to the price reductions Maya's courage had sparked. And tomorrow, Maya would begin the next chapter of her mission to provide cardiac care to underserved communities worldwide, carrying forward the lesson she'd learned in Seat 2A of United Flight 487, that dignity isn't about the space you occupy, but the grace with which you occupy it. Justice, Maya had learned, wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was about transformation. Sometimes it was about refusing to let hatred change who you are. And sometimes it was about turning your worst moment into the world's best opportunity for change. The story of Dr. Maya Williams and United Flight 487 became more than just a viral moment or a news cycle. It became a catalyst for widespread change across multiple industries, a case study in how individual courage can create collective transformation, and a powerful reminder that dignity is never negotiable. Maya's refusal to accept discrimination didn't just secure her seat on an airplane, it secured life-saving medication access for millions of diabetic patients, reformed airline policies nationwide, and inspired a generation of medical professionals to view their work as inherently connected to social justice. The ripple effects continued for years. The Maya Williams Foundation for Medical Equity provided scholarships to over 500 underrepresented students pursuing medical careers. The pharmaceutical pricing reforms sparked by Richard Blackwell's transformation saved American families over $12 billion in medication costs. Captain Marcus Rodriguez's diversity training programs became the industry standard for addressing discrimination in aviation. But perhaps most importantly, Maya's grace under pressure, her decision to save the life of a man whose wife had tried to kill him, whose company had caused countless deaths, demonstrated that true strength lies not in responding to hatred with hatred, but in refusing to let evil compromise your values. As the creator of this channel, I want to share something personal with you. Stories like Maya's remind us that everyday heroes walk among us, often invisible, until crisis reveals their character. What strikes me most isn't that Maya stood her ground. It's that she chose healing over hatred, When given the choice between revenge and redemption, she chose to save the life of someone who'd tried to destroy her dignity. That's not weakness. That's the kind of moral courage that changes the world. I've learned from covering these stories that true strength isn't measured by how loudly you fight, but by how quietly you stand for what's right. Maya never raised her voice, never returned the hate, never compromised her values. She simply refused to accept that anyone else could determine her worth. And in doing so, she reminded all of us that our dignity is not subject to other people's opinions. My advice to you is this: when someone tries to shrink your world, expand theirs. When they try to push you down, lift others up. When they question your right to be somewhere, remember that your presence itself is proof that you belong. Victoria Blackwell spent months planning to murder her husband for money, but it took Maya Williams just moments to choose to save his life. That's the difference between living with a closed heart and living with an open one. If this story moved you, it means you understand that dignity isn't negotiable, and justice isn't just possible. It's inevitable when good people refuse to stay silent. Share this video with someone who needs to remember their worth. Subscribe because every story we tell is a reminder that courage is contagious, and your voice matters more than you know. The question isn't whether you'll face discrimination or injustice in your life, you will. The question is, when you do, will you have the courage to stand like Maya Williams? Will you choose grace under pressure? Will you turn your pain into someone else's progress? That's the real lesson here. Heroes aren't born wearing capes. They're forged in first-class cabins, hospital corridors, and moments when nobody's watching except the people who need to see that dignity is stronger than hate. Until next time, remember this: your seat may be temporary, but your character is permanent. Make it count.